Today we are going to read weird things happened on an elevator or a lift ride. First, to clarify, as you can hear from my accent, my English has more British influence than US, and in the past episodes I often used lift and elevator and flat and apartment interchangeably. As today's stories involve those words multiple times, I will stick to elevator and apartment. After all, those are the words Koreans would use too. Well, my little apology to my viewers from the UK. Elevators have been used as the stage of various scary, horror, and fantasy stories and films worldwide. The claustrophobic little box that encloses you from the outside and that you are forced to share that space with often total strangers with no possibility of keeping the usual personal space or escape trigger our urban anxiety of strangers and crime. While on more mysterious note, the fact that the little box takes you to somewhere else than where you started lends itself to various kind of time or dimensional travel theme. By now in Korea, about half of the population are living in apartment blocks. It is somewhat inevitable considering the dense population mostly concentrated in major cities, plus the fact that real estate is deemed as main object of investment and the subsequent bubble contributed to the trend too. Unlike in older Europe, where large apartment blocks are typically viewed as a social housing or a legacy from the communistic era, in modern Korea, many actually prefer them for its convenience. Indeed, some high-rise apartment that goes 30, 40 or higher stories are often marketed as very high-end property. By and by, this housing style makes elevators a firm feature to many Koreans' daily life and the country a fertile ground for various stories involving around elevators. I did already read some stories that takes place in and around elevators in my episode about the elevator game and the serial killer Yoo Young-chul. If you missed them, links are in the description. But today we are full in with the theme, ranging from real-life crime to inexplicable paranormal encounters. So here are 5 allegedly true stories from Korea about elevators. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. My family used to live on the ground floor of an apartment block. In a high-rise apartment block, ground floor tends to be the cheapest. And, well, my family wasn't well off at the time. For that reason, I had a thing about riding the elevator. I even made it a weekly ritual to ask Mom to take me on a ride on the elevator all the way up to the top and down. One day I decided to take the journey by myself, but I was too young to know what to do to make it run. The doors closed and I ended up just stuck inside the elevator. I bursted into tears, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, somebody asked, "Why are you crying?" from behind me. A lady was there, clad in black clothes with bob-cut hair and glasses. I explained I could not open the elevator door. The lady then pushed the open button for me, and I could finally get out. Problem is, when I got on the elevator, it was empty. One day when I was 17, I was on my way back at 10 p.m. after a long day at school and cram school. I lived in an apartment block and I hopped on the elevator as usual. As the door was closing, I saw a man rushing towards. I thought he should want to take the elevator too, so I held the door open for him. But he just stopped in front of the door and panted hard. I thought he was just catching his breath and waited a few seconds. and asked if he wasn't getting on. He didn't reply, but glared at me strangely, which gave me cribs. I let go of the door, and in those few seconds till the door closed, I just had to face the strange man. About 6 feet tall and well-built, but nothing outwardly odd. As the door closed and the elevator started moving, I heard loud footsteps in the staircase hall. Elevator stopped at the first floor and the door opened. That strange guy was there, glaring at me. As the door closed, I heard another loud footsteps. And then, you guessed it, the elevator stopped at the next floor, and there he was again. This must be some crazy guy. I started panicking and tried to ring my mom. All the while, at each floor, the elevator stopped, the door opened, and the same guy was there, just glaring. I know it sounds crazy how he could keep up with the elevator. He must have been as fast as an Olympic sprinter or something. Mom wasn't answering my call, and now the elevator was finally reaching the 8th floor where I lived. In that short moment, my mind was running in all directions. What should I do? Would I be able to push past him? What would he do then? What if he tried to grab me? The door opened. Nobody was there. I don't think I have ever been faster to open the door to my apartment. I jumped in and was about to lock up, and I heard giggles ringing off from the staircase hall. I could have fainted. Fortunately, we moved out of that apartment block not long after, but I still dare not using elevators to this day. One winter night in my 20th year, I was on my way back home from drinks with friends. It must have been 11 p.m. or so. My apartment block was situated in a quiet corner at the foot of the mountain. I noticed 2 other people walking in the same direction. One was a teenage girl in her school uniform, and the other was a young man. Indeed, all 3 of us entered my building. The young man took stairs, while the girl and I took the elevator. She seemed a bit tensing up to be stuck with a strange young guy in the elevator. Not to alarm her any more than necessary, I took the farthest corner from her and minded my own business, fiddling with my phone. Apparently she was going to the 8th floor while I myself to the 14th. Not long after the elevator arrived the 8th floor, the door opened with a ping of the bell, and the girl took one step out. But I noticed the motion-detecting hallway light was not coming on as usual. I looked out casually, and I saw a vague figure in the dark. Before I could think straight, my body reacted first. I pulled the girl back in the elevator and pushed the close button like mad. Of course, the girl panicked and gave me the most terrified look, but while we were going up to the 14th floor, I tried to explain what I saw. As I said, the hallway light didn't come on the 8th floor, but from the corner of the elevator where I was standing, I could still see, thanks to the dim light from the elevator, a pair of trainers hidden in the dark corner. And they belonged to the young man I saw on the way to my apartment block. While the girl and I were waiting and then riding on the elevator, he must have sprinted up the staircase. My parents called the security to alarm the situation, and the girl's parents came up to take her down home. The security guard patrolled up and down the block, but of course the man was nowhere to be seen. What was he? What did he want? We would never find out. Shortly after the incident, they installed a card key system at the entrance to the apartment block. It's a story my former boss told me. He lived alone with his beautiful wife. It was rather unusual they didn't have children, considering their age. Seeing him adoring kids around, I just assumed there was some reason. Anyway, one night he was coming back home late, drunk from the staff dinner. As usual, he hopped on the elevator, and he sensed it was unusually cool inside the elevator. It was 2 in the morning, all right, but it was almost chilly. Elevator stopped at 5th floor. Expecting somebody getting in, my boss moved aside, but nobody was there. He shrugged and pushed the close button. But then it stopped again at 6th floor, and once again nobody waiting when the door opened. When it stopped again at 7th floor, he was annoyed and shouted into the dark corridor, "Stop it!" thinking some silly kid was pranking. But when the elevator stopped again at 8th floor and the door opened, there was somebody. A young girl looking only 5 or 6 years old. There was no sign of her parents or other adult. She didn't move. My boss asked, "Aren't you getting in?" But the girl just stood there without a word. He felt it a bit creepy and pushed the close button, but the girl opened the door again before it closed. "Well, get on if that's what you want to do," he said, only to see the girl just standing in silence as before. He got annoyed and berated that she shouldn't play with the elevator. There's a surveillance camera, and her mom or the concierge would scold her later. Only then, the girl looked straight at his face and said quietly, "I'm going to get in after Mommy." Her voice was strangely sad and creepy. But there was not a shadow of anybody who would look like the girl's mother. He didn't want to deal with this anymore, so pushed the close button, and fortunately the girl let it go this time, and the elevator didn't stop at each floor either. But before he could reach his floor, the light in the cabin started flickering. My boss was already all nerves with what had been happening, so he looked up at the light nervously and noticed a dark spot inside the lampshade, and it getting bigger every time the light flickered. "It can't be real. It's just because I'm too drunk," he tried to assure himself, but the stain in the lampshade got only bigger, and the temperature inside the cabin ever chillier. He forced himself to look away from the lamp, but what he saw next was even worse. On the polished frame of the elevator door, he saw a reflection of a hand of another person. He could not wait till his floor anymore, so stopped the elevator at the next floor. When the door opened, his heart skipped a beat, finding the young girl from the 8th floor waiting. Unlike earlier, the girl was smiling ear to ear. "Mommy's in, so I'm getting in too," she said. My boss could not take it anymore and just pushed his way out and took the stairs. He noticed the motion-detecting light coming on before he reached each floor, as if somebody was moving ahead of him. But he could not think anything else but going back home as soon as possible, and took 2 steps at the same time. Finally reaching his floor, he turned towards the corridor leading to his door, and saw there were some people in front of it. A woman whose long hair covering her face was holding the hand of a girl. That same creepy girl he saw earlier. He could not understand why they were there and how they could know where he lived, but his gut feelings was screaming that he must not run into them. He turned back towards the stairs again as quietly as possible, but his sweaty hand slipped on the round knob of the fire door, making the loud clanging noise. He instinctively looked back at the corridor and heard footsteps coming towards. Footsteps of a little kid. He just ran down the stairs. All the while the footsteps followed him. He jumped into the concierge's office outside the apartment building, which was empty. He peeped through the little window towards the entrance to the building and saw the same woman and the girl standing and glaring hatefully behind the full glass door. They seemed not be able to go past the front door for some reason. When the concierge came back, my boss explained what happened, but the concierge seemed to, understandably, think that he had an alcohol-induced hallucination or a nightmare. Nevertheless, my boss was in such a state that the concierge accompanied him up to his door. Finally, safely home, but my boss was surprised to find his wife still up with lights on in every room. It wasn't so uncommon that he came home late, and his wife would usually just go to bed before him. The story from wife only added to already terrifying night. She woke up from the doorbell going off. She first assumed it should be her husband, but soon realized it wasn't like his usual habit. When coming home late, he would always keep quiet, not as to wake her up. So she checked the doorbell camera and saw nobody at the door. She thought just go back to bed, but before she could lie down, the doorbell rang again. And again nobody shone in the camera. Now she stood by the camera screen, and as expected, the doorbell rang one more time. And this time she saw a person's face pushed right up to the camera, ghostly pale and expressionless. So she turned on all the lights in the apartment and then waited for her husband. Next morning, my boss asked the concierge to check the record of the surveillance cameras from the previous night. So he saw himself getting on the elevator all right. But then, inexplicably, he started pushing calls for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th floor. Arriving at the 7th floor, he shouted into the empty space, and then at the 8th floor, talking into the air again and fumbling with the door buttons. And then back in the cabin, he glared at the light for a long time before he stopped at 14th floor and rushed out. The concierge mockingly commented that he indeed must have had a glass or two too much. My boss could not protest, having no proof. But if it were all his hallucinations, what was it that his wife saw? I work for an elevator maintenance department. This is a 100% true account that I experienced myself. One day I and my partner were on the way back from the final checkup for elevators in a newly finished and yet unoccupied building. Everything was fine, but before we arrived at our office, we got a call from the building management that their elevator was malfunctioning. It was almost the end of our shift, but the management was persistent, and we had to go back. So we set the elevator in question on manual mode, and I went up on the roof of the elevator cabin. From there I could manually control the movement. In the middle of the checkup, my partner had to make a pause for the call of nature, so I was just killing time fiddling my phone in the dark on the top of the cabin. Then suddenly the cabin started moving. Despite the fact it was set on the manual mode and I had a control panel with me. The only other possibility was somebody put the whole system on reset. Then the cabin would move straight all the way up before it turns to the normal working mode. In whatever case, I was upset. If I weren't idling but checking on the cables and gears at that moment, I could have got injured. But quickly I realized it was odd. The cabin was stopping at each floor, which meant it wasn't on the reset mode either. I could not even move down back in the cabin while it was constantly moving. Then, I heard somebody giggle down inside the cabin. I first thought it was my partner and called his name out, but there was no reply but just giggles. A chill ran down my spine. My phone would not connect either while the cabin was moving. It must have been carrying on like that for a good half an hour, with me lost and scared in the dark. Then it finally stopped on the top floor, effectively trapping me. At least I could call my partner now, and I was waiting for him coming all the way up from the basement where he was. Then, "What you doing there?" said somebody from inside the cabin. I shouted I was checking the elevator, and whoever he was not supposed to use the elevator. There was no response, so I assumed he might have got off, but "What you doing?" he said again. "I'm working on the elevator," I shouted impatiently. "What you doing? What 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 you doing?" I was terrified. It couldn't be a sane person that I was dealing with at best. I covered my ears, but the voice kept ringing in my ears. Finally, the elevator moved down to the 27th floor, and I jumped out as soon as it stopped. I ran down to the security office to check on the surveillance camera in the elevator cabin. I was mad and had to find out who that crazy man was. Nothing. The elevator was empty the whole time. Nothing from the camera in the hallway to the elevator either. I declared I could not work there anymore that evening, so we hopped back on in our van. And right before we drove out of its parking lot, "Bye-bye," the voice rang in my ears once again, and I fainted. When I woke up, I was in an emergency room. My partner who brought me there told me with a baffled face. He saw me shuddering all over, and then shouting, "There's another! You piece of shit! Don't touch me! I'm hungry! Don't go, Mommy! Stay and play with me!" Before I passed out. I haven't been back to work for 3 months now. Still traumatized. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. Hope you enjoyed today's stories. I myself have never lived in an apartment yet, so actually I don't get to deal with elevators very often. Certainly after today's stories, I might rather take stairs wherever I can. It's interesting to see how paranormal stories adapt to modern lifestyle. In the past, it would have been usually damp cellars or dusty lofts where strange things would happen, but now it's in elevators and on surveillance cameras. I guess even ghosts have to learn as the technology evolves. If you liked my work, please give my little channel a boost by clicking the like and the notification bell, leaving me a comment, and subscribing to my channel. For those who have already done them, thank you. Until the next, have a wonderful week and take care.